Tobias, why don't you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you're doing now?
Sure. My name is Tobias Hendrickson. I am a 30-year-old, almost 30-year-old graduate of Brigham Young University, Idaho. And I am currently working as a legislative assistant or legislative advisor for Congressman Mike Kennedy of Utah.
Hey, you know what? Connor House works for Senator Kennedy in or Representative Kennedy in Utah.
He does. I work very closely with Connor House.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, sorry, that's just a side note. Okay, so how did you get there? Like, oftentimes it takes people a little bit to go from graduate at BYU Idaho to the job they like. How did you get to where you are now?
So what happened was I just started connecting with the right people. I had an opportunity at Brigham Young University, Idaho, BYUI, to attend a fireside devotional with Mr. Tim Stewart, organized by Further Miles, where he was sharing about his experience working in Washington, D.C., his career, his life. I wasn't very familiar with what specifically he did out here, but I thought that uh, in keeping with what he was sharing about his personal life and his spiritual journey and working out here and how that related to DC, I thought, man, that's a great example to me and also someone I would like to learn from. So I really bothered him for many months in order to get an invite to his house. And after getting an invite to his house, I worked very hard at presenting myself in a way that said, look, I'm a go-getter. I don't care what it takes. I would like to work for you. And I had the opportunity to. So for his interns, he treats as associates. For his business, I had an opportunity to work as an associate. Usually he brings them out to Washington, D.C., but I was finishing school and had a very pregnant wife at the time. So he allowed me to do that remotely. And so as I was finishing up school, for the better part of a year and a half, worked with Mr. Tim Stewart and got connected to wonderful people here in the Hill. Through that work, I had opportunities to fly out here and meet with people. And in doing so, I spoke with a legislative director for one of the Utah offices out here, who became a good friend of mine, who said, you do good work, but we are not in the habit of hiring people that don't have any congressional experience. I said, well, all right. So I put in my 2 weeks with Tim and I applied for every internship I could get, which I was technically overqualified for an internship, but you have to do what you have to do to get ahead in life. And I got the internship because I was a little bit overqualified. I excelled at it. And through those connections I made, I was able to secure a position with the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, where I worked as a research assistant focusing on veteran health care, which is the big policy issue for the VA committee. But because of my relationships that I'd made specifically in Utah offices, when an opportunity opened up with Mike Kennedy, I was considered for a position advising on natural resources and immigration, which I was uniquely qualified for through my work with Tim Stewart, and also because I am myself am an immigrant. I've gone through the process.
So Tim Stewart is a lobbyist. So you started doing an internship with a lobbyist and then an internship on Capitol Hill, and then you got a job in a legislative office. Is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
So there has to have been times when you were a student at BYU Idaho saying, "I want to do political science," that maybe you didn't know what you wanted to do with the degree, or people were like, "What are you going to do with that degree?" What advice would you give to students that are trying to figure out, like, what will I do with the degree in political science, and why would I major in this?
Yeah. Great question. In practice, always there are primarily two places to go with a degree in political science. There is the academic side of it, which is really fascinating and always the way I thought I would go in life because the theoretical has already always interested me and researching that side of it. But then there's also the practical, the saying, well, I would like to take the skills I've learned in education and instead of studying it, trying to apply it through working in government, through working in policy, and trying to make use of these skills I've learned to try to make an active difference in a political sphere. And I'd say if you're sitting struggling saying, well, I like the degree, but I don't know what I want to do with it, first decide Are you someone who wants to research the field and try to understand it better and help others gain a greater understanding of this complex, wonderful science that we all are affected by somehow? Or are you someone who wants to try to apply it and actively use it to, I mean, hopefully improve the lives of people in your sphere, in the country that your children are going to grow up in, and for this country in particular, a country that's going to affect the rest of the world for generations moving forward.
So, you're a go-getter. I'm gonna say that up front. There are a lot of students that maybe they visit the career center, maybe they hope that a professor is gonna like tell them, here's an internship you can do. Like, what advice would you give to students while they're at BYU Idaho, what they should do to kind of set themselves up for success when they graduate?
Setting yourself up for success is, in my experience, directly connected to how much you involve yourself in student life with your professors, with opportunities that come your way while you're at BYUI studying. The school does really well at trying to bring in people to share their experiences with you. I I have not had a single poli-sci class that hasn't in some way tried to connect us with people who work, whether it's in academia or in foreign affairs, in politics. They always try to connect us with people applying what they've learned in the real world. And trying to connect yourself with them is key. Actively working in, if it's pre-law society, political affairs society, the historical society, make yourself noticed in the student body and actually trying to get firsthand advice from your professors. It's one thing to sit as a student in a class of 20 to 60 people and doing the homework and trying to learn from it. Another is taking the time to sit with your professors between classes, after classes, and say, well, I find this part of your lecture or what you're teaching us really fascinating. Where can I go to learn more? What can I do to understand that better? That was something I really enjoyed doing, probably especially when I was single. Something that, it's you're never going to have these years where you have so much experience and so much knowledge readily available for you, and make use of it.
That's great. I was thinking about this. So you did an internship after you were done with college. You were probably living in DC and not getting paid very much for that, right? Like, how did you make that decision? Because that's like there are a lot of people that are like, I've got my degree, I've earned something, I've got some maybe some credentials that should mean something to me. Maybe an internship is a little bit beneath them or it doesn't pay enough or something like that.
Well, I was so fortunate that I was married at the time and had a very supportive wife who had earned her own degree and was working professionally. But it was serious conversation we had and a decision we made through a lot of prayer and a lot of conversations of, can we at this time in our life afford to do this? Is this something that we're comfortable doing? And not everyone will be, and I'm not gonna advise someone to say, "Well, we can sacrifice, not having as much financial stability over the next little bit." I'm not gonna advise that, but I will say that it is, if you're married, it's a decision between you and your wife, and an investment in the future often pay often pays off down the road, especially if you do it through faith, especially if you put your trust in the Lord and His guidance for you.
There are a lot of students that I know that want to work in Washington, DC, and they hope that if they like sit at home and apply for enough jobs online, that something will like happen for them. And frequently I'll tell them, if you want to work in Washington, DC, you need to go to Washington, DC. Can you explain a little bit why that is?
Yeah. I jokingly tell my wife that 99% of government jobs that people want to work in is here in DC, and that's just the truth of it, and that also means that every position out here is so desired and so valuable. When I gained my first internship, I was told that my application had been 1 out of 100. The reason they picked me is because they knew my face, they knew my name, they had experience with me, They had hit it off in personal conversations with me and knew I was a go-getter, knew I went the extra mile where everyone who applies to a job in Washington, D.C. has excelled at school. You're not going to take that chance if you haven't, and if you don't have an impressive resume in general, right? Impressive academic results. So it's highly competitive. Every resume generally looks the same. So what would set you apart is coming out here, making those connections, building that trust, making those friendships. It really is who you know, but in the best way possible. Because if they can put their trust in you, they'll do so professionally.
Does the church help at all? Like going to church help build social networks at all in DC?
I think the church helps a great deal. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is by nature very communal. I don't think we intend to prioritize our own people over others, but it breaks away some of those barriers that you'll find otherwise in professional life. When I was an intern, I had the audacity to ask a senator's chief of staff out for lunch because she was in the ward I was attending, and we were able to go, and there was not that professional barrier that separated us from intern looking for a job and chief of staff of a significant member of the Senate. It was instead the Relief Society president meeting with the new guy in the ward who was at the time living away from his wife and kid, and she felt bad for him, but also we did have that in common, and we're able to do that, and you see that a lot on the Hill. You see the relationships and partnerships develop easier when you understand each other's religious and cultural background, are able to emphasize with each other's experiences and know the moral code that you live by or strive to live by in your daily life.
I would imagine a lot of those decisions are just prayerful decisions, right? Like what ward you move into, where you live, all that stuff. I would imagine is just God guides you to meet the people you need to meet.
I genuinely believe so. I'm not great at identifying him, but my wife will sit and pick apart my professional life, my career track, and say, if you hadn't done this, or if we hadn't done this, or if we hadn't paid tithing around this time, uh, I don't think you would have gotten here. I don't think you would have gotten to this point. I absolutely believe that if you allow it, the Lord will guide you in your professional life as well. We read that in the Book of Mormon and the scriptures, right? With He wants us to pray over our fields, and I we had Elder oh Gary E. Stevens out here giving a fireside for professionals, staffers, and he said, the Lord wants His servants to be able to influence their country for the better, right? And I do think that if we strive to follow the commandments and if we strive to make ourselves available, the Lord will put us where He has need of us.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any advice for students like in school, like what classes they should take, what maybe like minor classes or extracurricular things to do? Does it matter what they do?
It matters if you know where you want to go. I took only political science classes, and I loved it. I also took sociology classes, which helped me a lot understand just the science behind crowds and the way we communicate and tribalism. That's helped me a lot in working with different parties, interest groups, and such. But we write policy for every area, every occupation, every degree. And so if you want to set yourself apart, be the guy who has knowledge of finance or be the guy who has an engineering degree and knows the specifics behind uh, how a building project is supposed to go or a bridge development, who can identify key issues. I'm not saying to necessarily get those degrees, but have an understanding and broaden your horizon because we are expected to be jack of all trades, masters of none, and everyone here has a political science degree. So set yourself apart, get an understanding of an issue area that you do find interesting and that you do want to work in, and that you will be able to speak intelligently on and advise someone in a position of power or be that person in a position of power that's able to influence that sphere.
I thought of another question real quick. So, Brother Adamson will frequently say, like, if you can only get an internship with a Democratic representative, but you're in your heart of hearts, you're a Republican. He's like, they'll let you make that switch one time from a Democrat to a Republican, but not back and forth. Is that still true?
I worry that it is less so true these days. The nature of parties today is such that we can all get along, but eyebrows are raised if you work in an office that is not aligned with your team. It was probably more true back in the day, but less so true now. And that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's good to know.
unfortunately, yeah,
It makes sense. Yeah. There's less overlap. It's just a different world than it was 20
it's
years ago.
different. Unfortunately,
What advice would you give to students that are considering graduate school?
do it. It's so much harder to do graduate school when you have a handful of kids or a job that takes you out of the house at 7:30 a.m. and that you won't get back until 7:30 p.m. It is so much harder to make room for that graduate school. However, if you feel in your heart of hearts and through the guidance of the Lord that you need to take a break from education following your bachelor's degree and get some professional experience, absolutely do it. Congress is such, and I know the federal government in general is such that it will encourage you to be able to pursue higher education later in life. We have great opportunities to be able to add to our education. It's something I'm planning on pursuing in the future when we get a bit more settled, but it's certainly a lot harder and a lot more juggling that needs to be done and a lot more patience from your spouse.
It's so true. Yeah, I think 10 people were living in my house when I went to graduate school. It was insane.
It's I am terrified of it, but it'll be my goal is to eventually come back and teach either at, BYUI or University of Utah, whatnot, whatever will
Mm,
have me. That's my end goal.
we would love that. Any other advice?
I would say don't let politics scare anyone. Don't let political science be a terrifying, mysterious thing. It's don't believe everything you see in the news. I know what I just said about workplaces with Democrats and Republicans, but generally speaking, we all get along. Generally speaking, respect everyone I work with. My coworkers are Democrats in that we all work in Congress. We eat at the same cafeteria, we ride the same metro. We can't help but socialize with each other. We have to work with each other, and they are genuinely good people. And they think very highly of me as well, I hope. So don't let there's a divide going on in the country, I think, where we feel uncomfortable speaking well of each other and we feel fearful that in doing so we might burn bridges or make less of the causes we support. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's necessary. So it's a great time to enter political science as a field because it's a great time to influence it for the better.